Hello. Given the content of this video, I figured it would be appropriate to situate myself in front of my bookshelf. So I don't know how I got it into my head that this would be a good thing to share online and like I should tell you about the books I've read, but sharing is caring, and I've read some really good books this year that I'd actually really like to talk about and that I really want credit for reading. Some of them I want my money back, but as that's not happening, I feel like this is kind of turning into a book channel, which is not the intention. I think I've always shared like various aspects of my life, and I think books have always been a big part of that, so they have to come in every now and then. You're going to have to hear about books at some point, and I'm sorry about that. I used to be such a voracious reader. Like I would read one to two books every week. When I was in high school, I went through so many, whereas now I think I've read 12 or 13 this year, and I'm like, nice, that's a good number, that's fair, that's a book a month, that's reasonable. I think it's partially I don't have the time, I'm really busy, which is what happens when you're an adult. I have work and I have university and I have loads of responsibilities, I had internships, I had friends. All of that kind of detracts from reading time. But if I just left it at that, that wouldn't be true. It's not just that I'm busy, I think I also sometimes seek different mediums when I have time, which is a very vague way of saying I have been watching a lot of shows this year, and in general the last few years. A lot of TV shows or YouTube when I have a few free minutes, whereas when I was in high school, when I had a few free minutes, I would be whipping that book out. The teacher's late to class, I am immediately nose in book trying to like tear through the pages. Whereas now, if I have a few minutes to hand, I'm probably gonna finish watching that YouTube video that I started watching earlier. I think it's just also how I use my free time that's changed a bit, but I have been trying to get into the habit of reading every single day. So normally I read right before I go to bed, which is good and bad. It's good because I think it's healthy to like do something that's not using a screen like on your phone. I mean, I use the Kindle, but it's meant to be fine. It helps your brain wind down, and I definitely feel sleepier after reading. It's also not good to read right before bed, because if I'm at like a really intense part and it's like a cliffhanger, I'm gonna finish it. Like I'm gonna keep reading, and then I end up going to bed really late because I'm not just gonna stop in the middle of that gripping scene even though it's 1 AM, but that is one way that I've managed to be really consistent. But anyway, the first book I read this year was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Oh my god, I love the book. That really got me out of a reading slump. Like I think before that I'd been really struggling to finish books. Donna Tartt has my heart. She really is just such a gifted writer in that she can really make her characters like fully come to life. Like you can see these like three-dimensional people. The way she tackles the plot and the way she structures the book is also just so gripping. It's very dark academia vibes. I think it was her first novel, but it does not come across as like a first novel. It is so well fleshed out. It's amazing. It basically follows this newcomer to the school, and he ends up in a Greek class, and everyone there is just so cool, and they are almost kind of cult-like, like the way they all interact. He kind of gets sucked into that world, trying to be part of them, and you know from the beginning that this one person, Bunny, you know, he dies, but you don't know how or what the details are, and it just gets more and more dark and twisted as you like follow them through the school year, and it gets more and more trippy, and it's just very good. I found a lot of the characters unlikable, but that was the intention. And the way it tackles like the hierarchy within the group and the complex relationships between the characters, it's really well done. And like from the main character's point of view, like going from desperately wanting to be accepted and to be part of this group, and the reality behind that facade is just perfect, great. I think a more modern version of that would be the book called Bunny, which I read last year, and that was also really good. Also very dark academia-esque with like some culty vibes, and that one is a bit more almost dystopian. I was wondering if she drew from The Secret History of Donna Tartt, because they have such similar vibes to me, but I could just be projecting. Off to a good start. Secret History, 9 out of 10, amazing. Then I read Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I actually have that book here, and it's a very cute cover. Basically, it is what it says on the tin, a feminist guide to investing, and it's super cute. This was written by the founders of Female Invest, which is this startup company. Their whole intention and existence is to educate young girls and women of any age on how to manage your money and how to invest and how to think long term. All things that we're not really taught. And the thing is, like, when you study social policy, you cover some really intense topics, and one of them was around poverty and the intersectionalities of poverty.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to jump in here because I had slightly misquoted the statistic. Basically, what I was trying to say is that 1 in 5 women are likely to be poverty-stricken in older age, and by that I mean 65 or 70 years old plus. This is due to a lot of reasons. There's not just one reason, so I'm not trying to oversimplify it. A big reason for older generations was that men were managing their wives' money and kind of just fucked them over. They would either not manage the money appropriately, and so that when they died, because women live longer than men, more often than not, the men would die and the woman would be left with way less money than they thought, or they just had no skills or expertise on how to manage that money. A lot of the time, women just are not given that education that they need, which is why they may not know how to wisely manage their money in the first place. It furthers that cycle of being dependent on men because they know better, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that's what I was trying to get across. There's a lot of studies on this, so yeah, feel free to do your own research, but
that's so awful. It's so scary to be so dependent on someone for your finances and to find out they weren't even managing them correctly. The fuck? Just in general, I've always had a fear of like being financially dependent on someone. Childhood trauma. I think after that unit in my university course, it really got me thinking like, maybe I should start thinking about what I want to do with my money. I don't have a lot of money, but it's always good to be aware and like to be financially savvy. And I think young people, especially girls, are very put off by this idea of finances because it seems really, and investing because it seems really complicated and like, you know, I don't have a lot of money. What do I can't do anything with that. And it seems scary and it almost feels like gambling. And because you don't receive that education on how to manage your money in a good way, you just don't do it at all because you don't have the information. And like, I felt the same. I found it very intimidating. I knew my boyfriend invested and he knew how to invest because his dad invested and his dad taught him. And that is how it works. The people who invest are the people who are already in a privileged position because they have someone to teach them how to do it. And more often than not, it's men passing information down to other men, right? Obviously, I don't begrudge my boyfriend that, but it did make me think, like, I could do the same. No one's stopping me. Yeah, I don't have that figure to teach me how to do that, but I can teach myself. Surely it's not that hard. And that's how I came across Girls Just Want to Have Fun. And I think their intention is to break that barrier, that limiting, self-limiting barrier, really, or like, I guess it's also society that's placed that limitation there that's not even real. You can invest at any age and with any amount of money. And this book is a really good starting point. I think I've done a lot more research and learned a lot more since this book because it really is just a foundation, but it's so good. It explains, it doesn't speak down to the audience, but it explains everything in explicit detail. Like, there's not one term that you will come across that is not covered in this book that's like important for you to know. I just found this so valuable, and right after I read this book, I made my first investment and I now have an investment portfolio. I would do a lot of research beforehand based on a lot of criteria in this book. It tells you how to research companies, what their risks are and what's viable, but also like ESG stocks. And that's something that this book, I really like what this book covers, is it talks a lot about ESG, which is environmental, social and corporate governance. Women are known to invest in stocks that have high ESG ratings, so that are basically ethical. And so the more women we get investing, the more we're supporting and investing in ethical companies, the more we can like change the world, which is a really fun concept. And it really did make me think, you know, like, I don't want to just invest in Apple. I want to actually invest in companies that I believe in and that I think are ethical and sustainable. So they also talk a lot about how you can do that and how to check if a company is rated well, and it's actually incredibly empowering to be able to like understand what's going on. A 9 out of 10 as well. Very palatable, very great introductory text. Honestly, better than like other investment books out there that are meant for like finance bros. So okay, next book was Catcher in the Rye, a classic. I've had it for so long. Yeah, I've had this book for so fucking long, but I literally, yes, and I had half read it and then I didn't finish it, and yeah, I finished it this time around, which was good. I actually finished it quite quickly. I initially found it quite, like, I was struggling to get into it, but I did eventually. I think it's a really good book. I think it's a great coming of age story. It's very wholesome. I think there's a lot of like really funny phrases that were obviously cool for the young kids to use back in the day, which I thought was really funny. I enjoyed the portrayal of boyhood and the difficulties of finding yourself. I didn't like all the weird sexual connotations where he was being flirted with like 30-year-old women. There were some things, because the guy's meant to be like 15, if I remember correctly. That's really fucking strange. He was refused like alcohol at one point by like the bartender because they could tell he was underage. So the fact that he's with these 30-year-old women and he's flirting with them and they were kind of flirting back, surely if a bartender is refusing someone because they look underage, you can tell someone's underage. Even if he doesn't look underage, he's obviously looks young, and that, I don't know, I just found aspects like that a bit strange. I don't think that was the author's intention to make it come off as weird and creepy, but I did feel like that was weird and creepy, and there were a few scenes like that. It really, like I said, it's a great coming of age book around like finding yourself. I think it captures that idea really well of like being forced to do something versus choosing to do something, like being forced to be in school versus choosing to be there and choosing to do well. I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, come on, this book's been out for ages, guys. Like, oh god, yeah, I forgot about this. There are also really, like, there's a lot of over-sexualization of girls, young girls and women in here. Don't age very well. Definitely not a fan. That's something I didn't say. I do feel like the author captured the narrator's voice really well. Like, you can hear the way he speaks and like his inflections, and that I think that's a sign for obviously really good writing. I mean, it's J.D. Salinger. I would rate it a 7 out of 10. Night Bitch. I just really fucking hated her husband. Oh my god, I hated that man. Like, I don't think that was the intention. Like, I think the intention was that they had poor communication. She just needed him to see her and communicate with her and think she was like see her as a person, which I think is a very fair thing to ask for and almost shouldn't need to be asked for, because what the fuck. Like, he was a very minor character. I don't think we even knew his name much, or like he maybe we did, but we didn't like speak about the guy much. Like, he did not come into the frame a lot, but when he did, I hated him. He was like a villain. The whole book is, you know, about this woman who quits her job to be a stay-at-home mother, and she kind of loses herself, and she starts hanging out with these other mothers who are stay-at-home mothers, and she doesn't really fit in, and it feels a bit weird and also kind of culty. And then she starts turning into a dog. She, like, I don't want to ruin things too much, but yeah, she starts like getting weird urges and growing hands, strange places, and transforms into a dog. Obviously there's a lot of symbolism there around learning to find yourself again after having a child, how to bond with your child. I think she definitely had like postnatal depression, and then being free and being animalistic and being able to be everything that like a woman can't be, especially when she has responsibilities and a family. Like, obviously there's like a lot more within that, but yeah, it's a very big like fuck the patriarchy book. I found the end so weirdly conceptual that I actually really struggled to follow what was happening. Like the last bit, I was just like, this has gotten very trippy very quickly. I liked it. I think it also kind of tackles the concept of not like that in depth, but like the concept of friendship in adulthood. Yeah, how hard it can be, because if you are a stay-at-home mother, like can you relate to your like colleagues anymore, or like your friends who are working, or sometimes they look down on you, and versus like stay-at-home mothers, she also didn't really feel like she got on with them. I liked it because it was like a narration of like you really heard what was going on in your head. Like sometimes it felt like a stream of consciousness, which was really interesting. It was a good style. I think sometimes I found it too in your face, like too like, yes, I know that's what you're trying to say, you didn't need to say it, like you had already shown it, but you're saying it as well, just to make sure we understand. Overall, it was good. It was good. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Then I read Lessons in Chemistry. Oh, I love that book. It's so lovely. I was so invested in the main character. It's about a woman who is a chemist, but it's the 60s and she's a woman, so therefore I read books like Night Bitch and Lessons in Chemistry, and I wonder why my Spotify Wrapped is just artists who sing like female rage songs. Anyway, that's about the chemist in the 60s and her kind of trials and tribulations trying to break into the industry and be respected, and how she ends up like on a TV show basically teaching women cooking. Like she's on a cooking show. She's meant to be teaching women how to cook, but she's also teaching them science. And I don't want to ruin anything, but there are some heartbreaking moments, and it's just such a lovely book. It's so well written, so witty. I loved it so much. Like, I'm sure it has its faults, but I would rate that a 10 out of 10, honestly. Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I was told that this book was meant to be like the American version of Normal People by Sally Rooney, and that's why I read it, because I was like, I love Normal People by Sally Rooney. That sounds amazing. I hated this book. I hated Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I found it all the characters so unlikable, but not in a good way. I had no one to root for. Everyone kind of sucked. Everyone was on drugs. I don't know. I think maybe you have to live in New York and do really intense drugs and be involved with very specific people to get this book, or like to relate to it. It's not even just like, oh, they did drugs, so unrelatable. No, like these characters are terrible. They're all terrible people. The main character, who I think you're meant to be rooting for, I'm pretty sure, she sucks. She fucking sucks. I don't know, she has this pick-me-esque vibe to her. She gets into this really toxic relationship. I don't know why everyone, like all the women in the book, seem to have these really crazy relationships with older men. It's just like younger women having relationships with older men. That is what this book is about, and it turning out kind of fucked and like toxic. And I think everyone did bad things and everyone kind of fucked up, but not in a redeemable way, in a way where it's just like, yeah, you do suck. You can't come back from that. Goodbye. But it just felt like everyone was a caricature of something. There was, I think he was Polish. There was like a Polish character. That character also did a huge disservice to Poland, by the way, if any of you are Polish. But like, oh my god, like the way he portrayed Poland is like a land of savages, basically. Like, it wasn't just him and this man who like speaks with a really strong Polish accent, even though he's been living there for a really long time, and always talks about how cold and dark Poland is and how like people only have like beans and soup. But like all the characters are like that. But yeah, anyway, I think it was meant to be cool and hip and like edgy, and I didn't find that. I didn't like it. I would rate this book a 4 out of 10. That is a book that I wish I could get my money back for, because like, what the fuck? I feel so Sally Rooney baited. It's like another version of Normal People. I think you mean a more ridiculous, absurd, poorly written version of Normal People. Moving on to a much better book, She Who Became the Sun. She Who Became the Sun is one of my favorite books, and it's actually a series which I recently learned, and I'm gonna be getting the next book. It's like a historical fantasy book, and it's set in the Mongolian Yuan dynasty. I might not be pronouncing that correctly. I feel like also when I read things, I just like make up the way it sounds in my head, and then a lot of the time it turns out it's wrong. But it's so good. Basically, it's about this girl. She lives in like extreme poverty with her family, like her brother and her dad. This isn't a spoiler because it happens right in the beginning. They both die. Right before that, her brother had been given a prophecy, or he had been told his fate, and he was told that he was going to be like a great person. He had like a lot in store for him. When they try to read the main character's fate, the lady was like, I see nothing. Like, there's nothing in your future, girl. Goodbye. The main character's name is Zhu, by the way. And when her brother dies, Zhu decides to like trick the gods and steal her brother's like fate. So she impersonates him. He had been invited to go to a monastery when he was like 12, I think. And so she walks to the monastery pretending to be him, and she like waits for ages. She finally gets taken into the monastery, and she is raised there with all the other boys, and she goes on to do some really cool, great things. There's a lot going on at this time. There's a lot of like turbulence in the dynasty. There are a lot of rebellions by like the Red Turbans, which is like a rebellion group. There's two sides to it, and you kind of see both sides. You get the perspective of the rebellions as well as the perspective of the people in charge, the people running the dynasty. It's so good. I love the blurring of gender and sexuality. I did not expect any gay when I read this book, and I was pleasantly surprised because there were not one but two queer love stories. I did not expect to have queer representation in this book, and it was a very happy surprise. And I really loved how they tackled Zhu's gender, and it was done in such a lovely way, and just so captivating. Like the world, the way it's described, the way scenes take place, it's just so beautifully written that I read it so quickly. I was like absolutely smitten with all the characters. I was so taken into this world. It was so well written. I really, really, really can't wait to read the next book, which is called He Who Drowned the World, I believe. So I'm very excited to read that. That'll be really good. Another 10 out of 10. Sorry, I'm being very generous with my like high ratings, but it's just so good. Then I read Stardust by Neil Gaiman, which I liked. Neil Gaiman is obviously a very talented author. He's written a lot, including Coraline, which is also really great. I think the book is really, really well written. It's a great fantasy. I mean, I feel like most people know the story because there's also a movie, but it's basically boy who is kind of half magical because of something his dad did. He ended up going on an adventure on the other side of this wall, and on the other side of this wall it's magical, and he goes for a woman or a girl who he's in love with back home to go capture a fallen star, but it turns out the fallen star is actually like it's like a person, it's not a star like a rock, because she is in this magical land, she's a person, but if she crosses the other side of the wall, she becomes a rock. There's like magic and adventure and a lot of stuff. It's really great. I really liked it. I really struggled to get attached to the characters, to be honest. I felt very distant from them. I don't know if it's because it was in third person, but that doesn't necessarily for me mean like I'm not going to be attached. But I don't know why, I think we did flit between a few characters. It was really good for the storytelling plot, but it was a really great way to like move the story along and show different perspectives so you can kind of understand why certain things are happening. But I found it really hard to get attached to someone because I really never saw their internal dialogue. And so the love between, I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but like the love that blossoms between the two main characters, like I wasn't really rooting for them. Like as people I was rooting for them, but like their love story, I was kind of like, it just didn't hit the spot for me. Maybe it's also I just read some really great queer romance that I was very invested in, but I loved the adventure aspect over any other aspect. Like the plot itself was really good. 8 out of 10 seems fair. Then I read Wise Children by Angela Carter. This is so stupid. I get really anxious reading books from like an old person's perspective and then like reflecting on when they were younger. I found this with The Blind Assassin by Margaret Atwood as well. So for me, very anxiety inducing because it makes me do that with my life. I almost imagine being old looking back on me now. That freaks me out. I can't explain why. I think I have this fear of like the ending of things and death, probably. The fearing of like the good days being over and looking back and being like, wow, that was my life and now look at where I am. And that is a little bit what Wise Children is like. It's like they were showgirls and doing so well and like knew all these famous people, and then look at them in their old age and they're in like this dilapidated house. They're just kind of past their like best days, which I don't think is necessarily true when you get older. I think you can have an amazing, fulfilling, wholesome life when you're 90. But I have seen a lot of portrayals of like this destitute, very depressing old age, and it instills a lot of anxiety within me. If you know any stories that are not like that and that are a positive representation of old age, I would really like that because it's probably better for me mentally. I don't think that was Angela's intention to like make out old age to be terrible. Like that obviously wasn't the main plot line. That's just what I took away from it, but it was a really fun book. I really loved it. It was so good. It was so well written as well. Very captivating, very witty, very, very witty. I loved their sense of humor. It like definitely captures that British stoicism of like managing to just matter-of-factly dealing with any crazy scenario that happens. Something absolutely shocking could happen and the main characters would be like, all right then. Like they just handle everything with such grace. It's crazy. Like, yeah, like I said, the British stoicism really shines through and I find that really funny. There was like a scene where she sees someone who's like surgically altered their face to look more like her and try and impersonate her. And I feel like she really brushed past that. There's almost like the humorous thing in it. Like there's all these crazy things that happen in their lives and obviously it's like a bit stressful, traumatic, but ultimately they kind of just brush past it. And even in old age, they're still like very witty and very like, isn't it crazy like thing happened? That's hilarious. I think why them being old was portrayed almost negatively from the narrator's life was just because they'd been famous before or like relatively famous, and so obviously when you get older people don't know you as much and that can be like kind of depressing. So I think it was more from that angle than like old age sucks. I think it really takes you through the golden age of cinema and theater, and it's very magical. It's very beautifully written. I liked it a lot. It reminded me a bit of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, just in that it also manages to capture that like essence of like you kind of see behind the curtain of Hollywood and theater and cinema, and you see what life is actually like behind it and like how media might perceive certain events versus how they actually happen. And I think both kind of have those elements, which I liked a lot. My Year of Rest and Relaxation, I love that book. I saw a lot of negative comments. Like a lot of people really hated it because they said the main character was really vapid and she kind of fucking sucked, but like that was the point. Like she was meant to be like that. Like I think she was meant to be an unlikable main character. So the plot of the book is this person is very depressed and she decides she wants to take a year out of the world and just sleep through it. And so she kind of takes medication, like sleeping meds, to make her sleep, and every few days she'll wake up and eat and do things, but most of the time she'll just sleep, and she's trying to sleep the year away, and her thought process is that it's her year of rest and relaxation, she'll come back and she'll be ready to take on the world. She keeps getting her meds prescribed by this really crazy psychiatrist. I don't know, it's kind of horrifying. It makes me worried that there are people, like, I mean, there obviously are people who practice like that, but like, this woman is unhinged, like, Jesus Christ. But she kept giving her like these pain meds. One of the specific brands kept making her do crazy shit when she was like blacked out. Like, she would think she was sleeping, but she was actually just blacked out and she was doing stuff on that sleeping meds, and that's terrifying. And honestly, this book, like, I don't normally like get nightmares from books or anything, but this book, I had like the most anxiety inducing weird, like, it wasn't quite a dream but almost a dream. Like, I was half awake and half asleep, but I felt like oh my god, I'm sleeping my life away. Like, but yeah, it, like, I think just the idea of like heavily taking medication in that, like, to the degree that she did, really freaks me out apparently, and I really took it to heart. But it was a good book. It was a really good book. It was an interesting ending. I found the ending a little underwhelming and very, very like making it all about her, considering some things that happened that were not about her. But that is the point. Like, she's meant to be very self-focused and self-centered and kind of an asshole. Yeah, it's a good book. I would say 8 out of 10. We're almost done. Okay, the last 2 books are by the same person. Song of Achilles was so good. Once again, it came for the plot, stayed for the queer romance. It was so good, and it is meant to be like accurate based on legends. When I was in Paris, I went to the Louvre and I walked through, oh my god, there's like a vase room in the one of the Greek sections. There's like not just a vase room, 10 rooms of vases, like long corridor, and I was like, I know that there's a vase somewhere here of the Trojan War and that has Achilles, and I just read this book and I really fucking wanted to find it. This is how I know I have the best boyfriend ever. Like, he was so determined to help me find it. He was like running through all the rooms, like trying to find it for me. It was very wholesome. It took a long time, but I did find it, and it was actually kind of underwhelming. He was playing like some game on the floor with his guards or something, and I was like, why is this what they made a vase of? Anyway, back to the story. It's great. It's really good. It's so good. I cried. I knew how it was gonna end. I obviously knew. It was sad in the best way. Like, this is also what received some negative criticism. Like, I saw people felt like Patroclus and Achilles like didn't have a believable bond, and like, I felt the bond. Oh my god, I don't know how some people could read that and not feel the love there. It's like all in the nuance, and like the way things are said or done is not spoken of like explicitly a lot, but it was palpable. Like, I could really feel it, and I really loved the balance they brought to each other, and I loved their mutual appreciation of each other, and it was such a beautiful love, and it was such a like soulmate vibe. It was beautiful to read. I was pretty shocked when people said they couldn't feel it, because maybe it's just me, maybe I'm delusional, but yeah, I thought it was really well written. Also, just like in general, I found it really interesting. Like, I've never known that much about Greek mythology, but I learned so much, and I got so ADHD hyper-focused on Greek mythology for a solid month and a half after reading that book. It was so interesting. It was so good. I was like, I'm gonna read so many fucking Greek mythology books. And then the other book I read literally straight after that one, because I couldn't get enough of the world, was Circe. Also so good. It's about like a water goddess, river goddess. She doesn't really fit in with the other gods and goddesses. It turns out that she's actually a witch, and then she does something terrible and she gets banished to an island by herself. She has all these visitors, like all these people coming to her island. She has a lot of visitors. You kind of see her grow in confidence and in her power, and it's obviously like a fantastical book, but there's so much that's very relatable to like the female experience in the world. It captures that feeling of being underestimated. Yeah, I think female rage was captured very well, and I think that's often done in books that have like a witch arc. It very frequently links to female rage. It also tackles single motherhood and the difficulties of like being a mother. I feel like I've read so many books about that this year, about how like the reality of being a mother and how terrible and awful it can be, and how people don't talk about it that much. I feel like these books really portray the reality and the difficulty and the sacrifices that you make being a mother, especially if you feel like you're doing a lot of the labor by yourself. Would read it again. Wish I could unread Song of Achilles and Circe and then reread them. They were so good. Both get 10 out of 10. I don't care if there were any flaws. Don't talk to me about them. They're perfect. I will be reading anything else that author has to deliver, because she has me hooked. After Circe, I was like, I need a break from Greek mythology because I think I'm over obsessing. I'm actually reading The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt because I really like The Secret History, and The Goldfinch is so well renowned. I was like, I've got to read it. Not gonna lie, I'm really struggling. First of all, it's like 860 pages or something. It's taken a while. It's taking a while. It's basically the length of 2 books. So I'm 40 something % through, but honestly, it's taken me like a month and a half to get to that point. First of all, uni's just been really busy. But secondly, I really struggled to get into it. I found it, I mean, considering a disaster happens in some of the first pages, which was obviously horrible, I really struggled to get into the story and into the like character's voice. I really struggled to like care that much. I found it very slow moving. It's picking up pace now, but I'm still really struggling to see where it's going. Like, I think I can kind of guess. I think when you're at this point, like 46% or something through, you should be able to tell where it's kind of going. And for me, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just unintelligent, but it doesn't seem very clear where the plot is going. And sometimes there have been things like, oh, it's gonna be like this, and then that's immediately resolved, and I'm like, okay, so it's not gonna be about that. I hate DNFing books. Like, I would rather finish a book that I hate than not finish it. That's what I did with Cleopatra and Frankenstein. I fucking hated it from start to finish, but I was like, I still have to finish it though, because what if, like, my brain is always like, what if it's actually amazing? And like, how can you judge a book fully without having read it? And also, I just don't like not knowing things. So like, to me, it's wild to not finish a book. I've never not finished a book to the best of my knowledge. Maybe it's a sunk cost fallacy. But yeah, that's everything I've read this year. I know I have made a lot of bookish content recently, but I hope to make lots of different content, including things that I'm studying. I mean, there's certain things that I'm really interested in that do relate to social policy. I think I'm always a bit nervous putting those kind of things on here because I don't really want to incite hate or misinform people about anything. I think there's a big difference between me talking about my opinion, like about books, versus talking about a topic and wanting to actually do that justice, especially if it's a contentious topic, and not wanting to misrepresent anyone. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I would love to talk about, and I will, like, I definitely will. I think social justice is a really big passion of mine, and it is what I'm going to be dedicating my life to and my career to. At the same time, also, because that's such a big part of my life, it is nice to have more of a creative outlet where I focus on fluffy things like books. I look forward to 2024. I don't. I'm really scared. I'm really scared about the year ending, and I'm terrified of getting older, and my birthday's in February, but I look forward to the books that I'll be reading in 2024. Thank you for joining. Goodbye.